This is Thriving in Business and in Life. My name is Will Wilkinson.
And this is Christopher Harding, and we've got kind of an exciting show today, Will. It's a first.
It is a first. We have a female in the studio.
and as
you
a
can
matter
hear
of
her
fact,
laughing.
and as a matter of fact, we have a guest. She's going to be a guest on the program.
And we're excited about that, especially if we run out of steam.
Yeah, exactly. It's helpful to have another mind involved.
So do you want to tell our listeners who we have here with us?
Yeah, we have a really great friend of mine. Her name is Natalie Anastasio Pescetti.
You had to say the whole thing. It just sounds like a fine wine or something.
Yeah, so Natalie, among many things, is a really gifted coach and consultant for people. She helps them really understand their archetypes. Mm-hmm. And what I love about her work is to understand their superpowers.
Oh, love that. So we're going to find out about our superpowers during this show.
We're going to find out about superpowers, but in particular, how she helps people use their superpowers to manifest their visions.
Great. Well, just to connect with our show last week, we were starting to talk more about visioning and results, and I think that's why Natalie is here. It just fits perfectly with, that theme in our book and where we've been going with these podcasts. And I think for anybody who takes it seriously, the great division between inner and outer has to be considered. There's a lot of people who dream things, have ideas, visions that don't manifest. There's a lot of people who think all that is hokum, and you just need to get your nose to the wheel, to the grindstone, and work hard to get your results. I think what we're interested in is the fusion between the two, the inner and the outer.
Absolutely. And I'll just mention, last week we were accompanied by a bullfrog outside.
That's right,
outside
back
your
at
cabin.
my house, yeah.
Yeah,
he's still there, by the way.
This week we're back in the office, and we're downtown, so we're going to hear traffic and sirens and
beautiful
who knows
downtown
what.
Ashland.
That's right. So, all right. Well, so I want to just pose a first question to Natalie. Natalie, why don't you just give us a little bit of sense of why the whole idea of manifesting is so exciting to you?
Well, it's kind of what you were saying, Will. I was lucky enough to grow up around mysticism. My mother was a tarot card reader and an accountant at the same time.
That's a hard image to have when I think of my mother. She baked bread.
Really?
But listen to that.
A tarot
card reader and accountant.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And my father was this incredible political activist who also wanted my sister and I to be exposed to all different kinds of spirituality. So we went to the Buddhist monastery for summer school. So I was really lucky to be, in that world. Right. I found out really fast that when we get involved in spiritualism, that we can lose sight of empowerment. Mm-hmm. We can give our power away really, really fast. Mm-hmm. So I got...
Well, so why is that? Why does that happen, do you think? Because you coach people. Why do they do that?
Why do people give away their power?
When they get interested in spiritual things, because I've observed the same phenomenon.
Well, it's the guru complex.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think there's two answers to that. I think that people that are in leadership positions in spiritualism have the tendency to get power hungry. Mm-hmm. And perpetuate this concept, that dogma of I know better than you.
Right.
So the things that people were trying to get away from with religious dogma, they run into when they get into spiritualism.
Yeah, it sort of replicates itself in a different way.
It really does. So I think that that's one answer. Mm-hmm. But I think the other thing that Chris and I have talked a lot about is how confronting it is to be accountable and responsible.
Boy, we could have a couple of shows on that. I mean, I've observed over the years the value that people put on material that cannot be checked in any way possible because it's channeled from some source. An alien told me. And there are books and books about this stuff, and you cannot measure it at all.
Yeah. You nailed it. And I had to confront that early on, right? I was interested in the esoteric and in mysticism. And yet in that, there's this paradigm that's poison, right? Of because I'm going through this timing cycle, I'm a victim.
Right.
which is why I love the material in your book, because you have these graphs that are calling this paradigm out.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that is in the spiritual world that it's still within that victim paradigm.
Absolutely. You're reminding me of a cartoon I saw in I think it was a New Age journal many years ago. It was just one panel, and it said, just because they're dead doesn't mean they're smart. I thought that was brilliant. There's a certain cachet to these exotic sources for information, but as you're saying, it really is an old paradigm that disempowers people.
Well, and one thing I want to bring out about Natalie is that she's got a practice of coaching, and I said she coaches people about their superpowers and their archetypes. I mean, just as soon as I say superpowers, I mean, what? What are we talking about here? So in that intersection between spirituality and the practical, which is really, I think, where you work, Natalie, is helping people find that intersection. Tell us a little bit about this whole notion of superpowers and what it has to do with people's ability to be empowered.
I'm a numerologist, okay? So superpowers are the numbers that are in a person's chart.
Mm-hmm.
At first blush, what that can be for people is this is a box or a limited personality trait that I fit into.
Right.
The notion of superpowers, what I found in this work, is that superpowers are talking about accepting the gifts that you have, but acknowledging that you can create anything that you want with those gifts.
So this is fascinating because I've always been a little turned off by systems that give me a number. I don't want to feel like I'm a 7, which apparently I am on the Enneagram. But aren't I unique? So what I'm hearing you say is that it's not that cut and dried, that the superpowers are not categories. It's like what I have uniquely true for me. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, think of it like a tool, right?
Yeah.
It's a tool. And it's like a magic wand that you can pick up and you can create what you want, right? But the concept of superpowers is that there's an instinct that's inside of you that's more powerful than anything that's in your environment. And if you acknowledge what that is...
Fascinating. An instinct. So
Yeah.
describe what you mean by that. I mean, when I think of instincts, certain things come to mind, but I want to know what it means to you.
Well, like for instance, there's some people that have an instinct to be independent. My mom is a great example. This was one of a very cathartic healing moment for me when I did my parents' superpowers, when I understood what their numbers were. My mom is a 1, fiercely independent, a career woman, always striving, ambitious. She moved out when she was 15, went to Woodstock. Incredible woman. Wow. I, on the other hand, have a 2. And a 2 is relationship oriented. My instinct is to bond, maybe even cling. Okay? Relationships are high value for me. So when you know this about yourself, it's easier to thrive.
Right.
And I was,
you can work with what you were given. This is a design
and
you came in with.
And you can transcend it.
Right, but you have acknowledging it, knowing about it is important.
And knowing it about the other people, like to the work that you guys do with diversity, right? One of, I think, a huge block in supernatural creation in our life, when we can really see that our life is becoming a true expression of our desires, a big block in that is assuming that other people should be like us.
Yeah, right.
Right? So when you do work like this, where you start to kind of feel out, well, who is this person without my shoulds and expectations? Can I see them?
Yeah. Well, you're reminding me of an event I went to, decades ago. I was helping manage an educational community and was having trouble with the director. I was kind of the second in command because we were so different. And constantly I'd be presenting these ideas because I'm very imaginative and innovative, and Dave was always, I don't think we should do that. And it really got boring, and we weren't getting anywhere. Well, we did a weekend seminar on personalysis, I think it was called back then. And we identified our different personalities. And I got that Dave did not respond kindly to innovative ideas. He was very conservative. So I decided to try out a totally different approach with him. So the next week, we had our customary meeting. I said, Dave, someone has come up with an idea, and I don't know. I really have my doubts about it.
You were speaking his language.
Exactly. I said, I have my doubts about it, and I don't know if it's even worth bringing up. And he said, well, what is it? I said, well, I'm kind of reluctant to even say anything, but it's... And he said, well, that sounds like that could be a good idea. I let him bring in the innovative spirit. He needed the comfort of the conservatism to feel safe. So is that kind of what you're talking about?
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I think compatibility is a verb. I think it's something that we have to consciously translate every day when we're interacting with people. And so when I was driving here for this podcast, I was thinking about visioning, right? I was thinking about, why don't we vision more? Why don't we develop a daily practice of engaging with that brilliant gift that we have as human beings? I think a huge deterrent is exactly what we're talking about right now, is we sit down on the meditation cushion and we're like, oh, yes, I see it and I feel it. We open up our eyes and we have to interact with other people. Yeah. And if we're doing so under the assumption that other people should be like us, or other people should opt into our vision,
right,
we meet up with a lot of resistance. We get catapulted out of the magic.
Yeah. Well, I've meditated since I was 22. And over the last year or two, I actually stopped meditating for periods of time because I felt that it had become like an addiction to a comfort internally, which got challenged the minute I opened my eyes, kind of what you're talking about. So I've learned my own visioning process, which I work with my clients. And I'm really curious to hear how you work with your clients on visioning.
Well, and one of the things I want to point out about Natalie's work as well, now she mentioned she has this two quality, very relationship oriented, but what's interesting about Natalie's work is she doesn't peg people to be just one type. She actually, shows people the complexity of who they are. Because one of the things I know about Natalie is she happens to have this 8 quality as well. And with everybody, we have multiple facets of our personality. So when we start talking about intersecting, it's important for us to know what our dominant themes are, what our dominant gifts are, but also to realize that we're not limited to just those. There are multiple facets to who we are. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that. And what was the question you asked, Will? It was also about visioning.
Well, but also working with people, because the three of us are all coaches. We're mentors, we're consultants, and it's different to know something ourselves from the ability to show it to other people.
Right.
And that's what I'm very curious about, because our listeners, in a sense, we're offering some coaching. And so I want this to be of value to them.
Well, so let me talk to that point. Something that I've recently discovered, and actually Chris helped me with this, just as colleagues, was clients run into a very simple problem when it comes to visioning, and it's making it a practice. So I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. So
does this mean you were being dishonest before?
Yeah, I was being
well, we'll forgive you that.
Okay, thank you. I mean, being very, very authentic and vulnerable. Candid. For the past 3 days, I haven't done anything that I preach.
Oh, well, forget it then. The show's over.
Yeah, I know.
We're out of here.
You're going to kick me out now? And Chris and I have talked about this, that it's visioning and what I call magical co-creation. So when we're creating our lives, when we're empowered, when we're approaching life with empowerment, right? It requires a daily practice. Yeah. And it's the fastest thing that we let go of. So what the first thing that I teach clients is magic is something that has to become a habit. Mm-hmm. It's like in these fairy tales.
I want to just pause on that because that is a great soundbite. Magic needs to become a habit.
Yeah.
That could be written up on the wall.
It's a powerful thought. And one of the reasons that I got into this work, this is going to sound kind of crazy, but I love movies and like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. And did you guys see that movie Willow?
Yeah.
Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
It's these movies about magic. And there's this thought that magic is this world, and once you enter it, you're in, and like that's it.
Yeah.
And it's not the case.
You're either in or you're out.
Yeah. It's like you enter that world and everything is unicorns and sunshine. But it's more like Harry Potter. It's like we wake up every morning in the Muggle world, and what I myself struggle with, and what I'm in the process also of teaching clients is we got to wake up and we have to make it a priority to acknowledge our ability to create. And so to your point, Chris, about superpowers and how that plays into it, it's about fully accepting your desires. I think this is one of the most common things that I've seen is that we're taught to almost be ashamed of what we want.
Exactly. Yeah, to be ashamed of what we want and then to pay big bucks to people who've gotten what they want to teach us how to get what we want, except that we don't want to admit we want it.
Yeah, boy. That's a great... That was very good.
That was good.
Well, one of the things we talk about in the book, and we covered a couple of 2 or 3 episodes ago, was the whole sense of understanding what our values are. And to Natalie's point, our values, you and I will in the book define those as the things that light us up, the things that are authentically, genuinely passionate about us. And if I'm hearing you, Natalie, that one way to really get in touch with our superpowers and to really understand what they bring is to really listen to what lights us up.
Yeah. And I've found that this is a great tool to start to open the door to that. Right? I'll give you an example. I had a dear friend of mine in high school who was the prom queen, very popular, always went to all the parties. And she would say, Natalie, quit being a fuddy-duddy and come out with us. And I always felt bad that I wanted to read books and I wanted to sort of be on my own. And it wasn't until I started doing that inner work and tapping into superpowers and numerology, when I did her numbers, she's a double 3, which is known as the social butterfly. This is her genius. Her genius is connecting with people and self-expression. Mine is deep, one-on-one, intimate connections. So I think that having conversations with yourself in your meditation practice, finding out what fantasies naturally come up when you're doing visualizations is a really, really great, powerful tool.
Well, you mentioned something about yourself that you haven't done your visioning for 3 days.
Yeah.
And I'd love to leverage that into an understanding of why we would do a practice. Because this is a problem any of us who work with people encounter, that they're all excited when they learn something and then 5 days later they're not doing it anymore. Part of it is just the overwhelm of modern society. I remember a piece of graffiti I saw years ago that said, when you're up to your ass in alligators, it's hard to remember that the initial objective was to drain the swamp. And that's kind of where we're at.
That's really good.
Just to pay the bills, just to keep the system going, our personal lives. Who has time for visioning? And yet, as you know, if we're not visioning, life's a lot harder than it needs to be.
Oh, and that was my point, was that if I go a day or two without doing my own visioning practice, my very personality changes. Yeah. So your question was, why don't we?
Yeah, why? When we're excited about it and we know it's good for us.
Knowing what we know, why do we continue to not do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that it comes back to the paradigm that you guys talk about in your book of you have to shift to this understanding that reality truly is porous. I think it's very malleable, but it's never malleable if you come into it as an observer. Like you're just observing what is. You if you want something to improve, if you want something to change, you have to actually show up in a new way. And we don't do that because we buy in to being more observers than we are imaginers.
Well, I totally agree with you. And another word I would use for observers is consumers. That instead of being creators, we are conditioned, programmed to be consumers, which is good for the system that provides what's necessary for the people at the top.
Well,
But
sure.
we're born to be creators, and that's what visioning is to create our lives proactively.
Yeah, and being passive consumers, creates a comfort zone, and it creates a parental relationship, right? And it's easy to fall into that false comfort. One of the things, Nat, as you were talking about, I started to think about an email I received today from a very prominent physician who's a leader in an academic organization. And he was sharing this email with an article about how important it is for anybody, but especially people in leadership roles, to create space in their day to be able to imagine, to be able to vision.
Wow.
And that one of the biggest problems in our corporate world and in life in general is that we're so busy doing that we don't take time to really imagine and participate in that, you could almost say, initial creative step.
And you know what? Victimhood is such an addiction. I've caught myself these last couple days with that. It's where if you're a consumer, you're a victim to what's offered, right? It is addictive.
Yeah.
It's addictive to wake up and just say, well, I'm going to take what I get. Or, gosh, I don't have enough. Or, whatever that story is. So I think that the practice of visioning is almost painful at first.
Yeah.
And I really want people to know that.
Right.
It's not, it's uncomfortable, because what you have to do is, no matter what's going on, you're in a fight with your spouse, your child's sick, you still sit down and you have a sense of camaraderie, love and appreciation for this inner world. And that you understand that with practice, that is going to produce the most amazing, miraculous results.
Well, and as we all know from learning new habits, there is a tipping point. Most of us learn to drive. And when we started driving, it was like harrowing. I mean, I got to hold onto the wheel. I got to look for people beside me. I got to use all these pedals. But at a certain point, after a lot of practice, it all became automatic. And now we can listen to the radio. We can carry on conversations, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's important for people to know that the visioning habit gets easier.
Well, and I think there's another analogy I just want to tack on to what you're saying. It does. I absolutely agree, Will. It becomes neuralized, some people call it, to where it becomes part of our cellular makeup. The other thing I want to pay attention to, though, is one of the things that gets in the way of doing something as natural as driving is distractions. Allowing ourselves to have our attention pulled by texting, by music, by conversations. It's what creates harrowing accidents, right?
Yeah, right.
And so one of the things, Nat, as you're coaching people, how often do you see that the distractions of life get in the way of their not only practicing visioning, but get in the way of their actually manifesting what they're imagining?
Yeah, I think that it is the most prominent issue. I'll go a step further, though, and say what I've seen recently is it's the distractions of the stories that we tell about relationships. I've seen that relationships are a huge, living, breathing thing that will either support that visioning process and support our empowerment, or if we approach them in a way that's destructive, that that's what distracts us. The stories that we tell about our relationships, it's paramount.
I totally agree. And the other day I came up with a little shift phrase from story to strategy. Because I was having a conversation with my wife, and she just said something, and I was about to pile on to grow the story, which was a disempowering thing for her. And I caught myself, and I said, well, what's the point of that? She's already feeling bad. Why do I want her to feel worse? So I made a shift into strategy, which was, how do we get back to where we want to be? rather than how do we reconcile and find out who is right, who is wrong, figure it all out. No, forget all that. That's just story. How do we get to where we want to be?
It's brilliant. That's brilliant. And
I'm writing that down. Our guest just told me I was brilliant.
That's brilliant.
She hasn't told you you're brilliant yet, Chris. So I just want to point that out. I'm also humble.
Well, I want to say something to that point. When we acknowledge diversity, and what I call acknowledging the superpowers in the people that are in our lives, it becomes this boon for our empowerment and for our ability to move forward. So when we have those moments that we can just go off track and get distracted by a story about our spouse or about a coworker or a boss, if we can actually use those moments as opportunities to consciously translate what might be going on for them, while also honoring ourselves and our own vision in action, it's amazing.
Well, and I love that, because as you were saying that, Nat, I was thinking about, just the notion that in honoring who they are and wanting the best for them, like you were for Tashina, your wife, Will, that you suddenly found yourself remembering that part of our role is to facilitate each other's genius, to bring each other back to that wonderful place of where we are accessing our superpowers. Yeah. I know our time is about out.
We're just about up. I have one more question I got to ask Natalie before we're done.
Okay, all right.
Which is, what's your superpower? I mean, you're not wearing a cape and you walked in, you didn't fly. I want to know what your superpower is.
It's the superpower of influence.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think we might have to have Natalie back for another show to get into that.
Yeah, there's so much more to add to this. I want to just let our listeners know that Natalie is available at natsnumbers.com. That's natsnumbers.com. She's got a wonderful website that'll give you more insight into the work she does.
And there's no G on Nat. It's just N-A-T. I'm just checking.
That's cruel. I got made fun of.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Nat.
Really?
Yeah. And
I'd never thought of that before.
Yeah. It's not important.
Will has kind of a mischievous streak, if you haven't been able to tell.
Yeah, another word might be demented.
All right. Well, you've been listening to
We
Thriving.
got another minute or so. I don't want to cut this short.
Oh, all right.
I don't know what happened to time. But we've got another minute or so. Natalie, I really appreciate you coming in here. If there's one thing you could offer our listeners as a takeaway for them, let's assume they've listened, they've been kind of enticed into the conversation, they love the idea of vision, they heard you when you said you've got to have a practice, so you've got to do it regularly. They're not going to benefit from coaching with you. They're just hearing this. What can you give them that would really serve them moving forward?
I would say wake up every morning and develop a near delusional inner orientation to your vision, to your dream.
That's wonderful, because I love to be delusional. But near delusional vision, that's wonderful. Well, you've been listening to Thriving in Business and Life. I'm Christopher Harding.
And I'm Will Wilkinson. Thanks for joining us. And our email address is thrivinginbusinessandlife@gmail.com. And we want to thank our listeners, new listeners, Will, in Russia and New Zealand. Excellent. Join us again next week. So long.